Hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. Well, around the world, holiday celebrations are a central part of who we are and of our cultures. And I think these celebrations connect us to our history, to our past, to our religious traditions, and even to our folklore. And I think of much of what we do in our work, our vacation schedules, our gatherings with families and friends actually revolve around occasions, these holidays and celebrations. And with this in mind, I feel honored to take the stage with my daughter Emily Thorpe, as you could say, we rewind the clock and talk about how our family has celebrated holidays and special events over the years, and how our family practice may be similar, but yet may be different from people around the world as well. And we're going to be trying to focus on as much as we can on cultural diversity. So with that said, I'd like to bring on my daughter right now, Emily Thorpe. Welcome,
Hi.
Emily, to the broadcast today.
Hi, thanks for having me, Dad.
All right. So, Emily, why don't we go ahead and begin by just introducing yourself a little bit?
Okay. So my name is Emily. I'm his youngest daughter. I was born in Machida, Japan. I am currently studying for a bachelor's in fine arts, specifically in ceramics. And I'm married and I have one son.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you for sharing that introduction. And as people probably wondered, did I catch you were born in Japan?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. And so if we could take a look at this, you don't remember this, Emily, but this is in that small, teeny hospital where you were born. It was a wonderful day in our family. And the other picture is of Josh feeding you. You don't remember that one as well. All right. So let's actually get right into it. Let's just see who is joining with us. Hontan, greetings, everyone, joining an early Monday morning. Prajya, thank you. Good morning. Again from Nepal. She's going to be on our episode next week. And Mona says, hi, Emily.
Hi,
All
Mona.
right. And that is great. And thank you for sharing, Mona, and so forth. Well, let's just get right into this. What we're going to be talking about with our viewers today is, number one, we're going to be talking about different holiday celebrations. As we do so, we want to keep in mind, number one, that these represent what we have done in our family, Emily. And the other thing is, we'll also try to tie this in with how other people, three houses down from us, celebrate those days as well. We're not going to be covering all of the holidays, but some of the most important, at least to our family. We're going to talk about Halloween, which was just yesterday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and other holiday celebrations done by and remembered and observed by other people as well. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, Easter, and other family activities. So we're going to take it from there, Emily. Before we do in, Riyadh. Riyadh says, hi, Riyadh from Tunisia. Riyadh joined us last week. Again, please take a look at that episode on creating YouTube channels. Rafael from Guatemala. Welcome, Rafael. Alev from Panama. Great. Elef from Tunisia. Hi, everyone. Dadi from Colombia, and Samaya. So, Emily, it looks like you have a slight following today. Again, throughout the broadcast, as we talk about these. Oh, and we have, good morning, Randall. Being born in Japan sounds like a whole fun story of another chapter. Absolutely. And I think, Emily, if we had time to talk about that chapter, certainly we would. All right. So again, throughout the episode, as you know, Emily, we're going to be talking about, again, culture, the traditions that we've been observing over the years. And we invite you, our audience, to ask questions, not only about what we have done, but maybe what you've heard about and so forth. So let's get right into this, Emily, if we may. And let's go ahead and get to the first one, is Halloween. So let's talk a little bit, Emily, about Halloween, how we've celebrated that over the years, and perhaps how other people have done it as well.
Yeah. So Halloween was always my very favorite holiday. Growing up, we would dress up and go to school, and school was never educational on Halloween. We would always just play games and eat junk food.
You're saying instead of having regular lessons, there might have been a focus on Halloween and other activities.
Yeah, it was just activity day. And then we'd come home, and we'd get together with the neighborhood to do their version of a trick or treat, which is called a trunk or treat, where cars would be decorated, and you would go trick or treating to each of the different cars.
Okay.
From the neighborhood. And then we would also go trick or treating in the neighborhood. And then we'd come home, and as we got older, my mom would confiscate some of the candy, because we would often have way too much.
Yeah, and I think as a parent, you're trying to, try to help your children develop good eating habits and so forth. But I think Halloween was a day where just eat as much candy as you can.
Yes. And then hide it in your room for later.
Exactly. So in this particular picture, do you remember what you were dressing up as?
Oh, I don't remember the name of what it was, but it was one of those like poodle girl costumes from like the 1950s or 60s.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly what the style was called.
Okay, and it looks like Aubrey is dressing up in a kimono. It looks like Josh is dressing up like a pumpkin. And I think, what about Michael? I think that's a clown or something like that.
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. And what about carving pumpkins? What do you remember about doing that?
I can't say it was my favorite Halloween activity because it was always really messy. I never liked reaching my hands in and pulling the seeds and stuff out. But it was fun to actually cut into the pumpkin and make weird faces and stuff like that.
Cool. And again, feel free, anyone who is watching, to ask questions about any of the holidays that we're talking about today. Also, if we look at this was one of our first Halloweens as a family. That is our daughter, Aubrey. She is dressed up in the clown outfit, and then her cousin, Jessica. And there were other activities that we did. When we moved to Japan, we also celebrated Halloween there. This is a picture of us with some neighbors, some friends of ours. Josh is dressed up in a robot kind of outfit. Shirley made that. My wife made that. And then I'm dressed up as a pirate. And then Aubrey as looks like a kind of a fairy. And then one of the other activities that some people do is called apple bobbing or bobbing for apples. So Emily, could you share us a little bit about your experience doing that and what the object of the game is for this activity?
So the object of the game, there's a big bucket full of apples floating in water, and you're supposed to use your mouth to grab it out. I've never liked that because you get water all up in your nose and you're choking and coughing. And I don't think it's very hygienic. I mean, you're choking and spitting into it, and then someone else does it, and it's kind of gross.
Yeah, and I think we did that a number of times when the kids were smaller. I mean, later on, I don't think we did it as much. As you mentioned, I don't think people like to get water in their nose. And oh, there have been 20 other faces in that bucket. I'm not going to do that now. Yeah. So certainly that could be something. But we did. These are pictures from Japan. Also, let's talk about some of the costumes that you remember of any of the kids that wore it. You remember Josh in this one?
I do. That was really impressive. And how his dog Amelia was so confused. And yeah, he was able to fool a lot of people that day into thinking he was an old man.
I mean, he wanted perfection. I think he wasn't doing it. I know that mom was helping with that, making sure he got the face right, the body language just right as well. And I think that was really cool. And then what do you remember about the pumpkins? This is our garden. This was, I think, the first year that we grew pumpkins. Do you remember much of that?
I don't.
Okay. Well, these were actually in our yard, and we decided to grow pumpkins, but instead of on the ground, we grew them on vines that grew up. And so the pumpkins that you can see are hanging down. And I think that was a real fun activity. And then we had different decorations over the years out front. And this Halloween was a little unusual just because of COVID-19. And I think a lot of people, out of concern for public safety and for others. I know that the number of cases is rising in many places. What we did at our house is instead of people coming to the front door and knocking, we set up a table out front, and there were a number of people in the neighborhood that did it in a similar way, kind of organizing that, where people would walk by and I had a table set out. So there were pieces of candy that people could grab. They weren't grabbing out of a bucket or anything like that, but they were, trying to, maintain social distancing in that way. What about you? What did you do for Halloween yesterday?
We actually didn't do really anything. It was pretty much a normal day. Odin dressed up in a Buzz Lightyear costume, who is his absolute favorite character. And he wore that for a couple hours, and then he wanted to take it off, and he just played all day. He got some ice cream after dinner, and that was it.
Well, cool. That's great. A couple of comments coming in. Hakima is joining us from Tunisia. Hello, Hakima. And then Kaylor Vargas from Costa Rica says, due to ignorance, many people believe Halloween is an evil celebration. As I was growing up, my parents taught me so as well. And so, yeah, I think there are traditions behind the day. Currently, I think it's just a fun day for people to get out, to be safe, to share in human connection. It was fun for me just to watch people walk by and say hello to people that often you do not see. So it can be a fun thing. Well, let's go on, Emily. Let's talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. What do you remember growing up? And what we also want to talk about is how other people might celebrate the day a little bit differently. So what do you remember?
Growing up, we would go over to my grandparents' house, and everyone would be there. And my dad makes really amazing mashed potatoes, so he was always in charge of bringing those. And then we would just eat lots of turkey, potatoes, rolls, pumpkin pie until you were very sick.
Really? And who made some of the best food? You mentioned about the mashed potatoes, but what about the rolls?
My grandmother makes amazing rolls.
They are so good. I think that this picture actually has her rolls there. I think this was one of our more recent Thanksgivings where we got together, and those are her rolls. And I think it's a day to Thanksgiving to remember, to express thanks and gratitude for things that we have, and just being able to connect. And I think, Emily, we don't know how we will celebrate this Thanksgiving just because of COVID-19, but certainly we'll try to do whatever we can under the circumstances. Great. And then we have another comment here from, hello from Mexico. Love your broadcast, Randall. Thank you very much. It's always great. And again, as we go through the broadcast today, feel free to share any comments and questions that you might have regarding what we did, but also what other people did. And the last thing I want to talk about Thanksgiving is, Emily, a lot of people think, okay, people eat turkey. But from what you know, how do other people celebrate this day? Or perhaps what might they be doing in other parts of the United States to celebrate this day in terms of foods or other activities?
I know a lot of families play football on Thanksgiving. We're not really a big sports family, so that was never for us. And then in different parts of the country, I'm sure that they have different foods and things like that. But it is generally a day of thanking, being grateful, and enjoying a meal with your family for most part of the country.
Yeah. And I think so. And I think there were times years ago when we sometimes played football, flag football, touch football with some of the family. I know that's pretty popular. And also you mentioned about foods. I know that in the South, they might eat something called dirty rice. So there are different foods, especially when you're talking about different customs brought into the holiday and Thanksgiving season. It can be a merging of traditions as well. And Wasilla says, hello, Randall and Emily, happy Halloween. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dottie says, we are humans, so we think different. Every mind is a world. I really like that, right? Many people celebrate it. Meanwhile, others do not. We should respect each other. If you don't celebrate, it's okay. And if you do celebrate it, it's okay. But if you do not, that's okay too. And I think we would both agree with that, Emily.
Yeah.
Okay. And that kind of leads into actually the next topic, which deals with end of year holidays and observances. And I know, Emily, as we were preparing, you were talking a little bit about a lot of times things are focused on Christmas, but there are other holiday traditions as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And so if we were to kind of look at some of these, for example, we would probably think of, St. Nicholas Day, December 6th, Hanukkah. When you were in school, Emily, and like in junior high or elementary school, did they ever mention Hanukkah or anything like that you remember?
It was mentioned, but it wasn't really talked about.
Okay. So kind of some awareness, at least trying to make awareness. We have Boxing Day in different countries. The winter solstice, I think, is another holiday. Kwanzaa, an African-American holiday, remembering African observances and festivals that started in the 60s. Omisoka is actually New Year's Eve, and then Ramadan. It's interesting when people think about Ramadan, they don't see it as an end of year celebration because it's not. The period of Ramadan by the Muslim people is a period of fasting and prayer and reflection. But because that holiday rotates every year, that the next time that Ramadan will be celebrated during the holiday season is in about 10 years from now. And it's simply, as we have talked about, Emily, it's just good for people to be aware that as you're celebrating Christmas, as you're celebrating these other end of year traditions, there are other people that are doing things as well. And I think that's really important. So let's talk about Christmas then. Let's go into our family. And what do you remember? How have we celebrated Christmas over the years? And did you believe in Santa? Let's start with that.
I absolutely did believe in Santa. I would try many times to catch Santa at night. My bedroom was very, very close to where the stockings were, literally feet away. So I would always try, but I never managed to catch Santa.
And what time? And usually, what time did we let you guys get up? When did you want to get up out of bed? And what time did we eventually let you get up to check the Christmas tree and so forth?
I don't know exactly what time. It probably was around 6 a.m. that we would wake up. And then we would have to go downstairs and stay down there until probably 8:30 or so.
Okay, great. And I think for many people, Christmas is a time to remember for them the birth of Jesus and so forth. And I think I want to highlight that for many people. That's deeply meaningful. So let's talk about some other things on holidays. And I want to just check some comments that are coming in, Emily, if we can, before we go on. Mona says, celebrations, whether religious or other, are made to unite families. Families meet and share love, forgiveness, and happiness. And when you think about that, when I think about this, Emily, about forgiveness it coming together, kind of putting things past. And I think she also mentioned, Mona, about some are religious, some are not. And I think we can enjoy that in sharing together. Samaya says, I tried to do the same activities with my pupils. I bought some costumes and the makeup in our English club with Michael Jackson's song, Thriller, right? And we danced and we sang along, had fun, although we're a Muslim society, but our pupils started to ask questions about this feast. So it kind of led into discussion. And I think that's really important. Odelis says, in Mexico, we celebrate the Day of the Dead, which is in the beginning of November. Thank you for mentioning that. A lot of times people are not aware of the Day of the Dead. But I like Halloween too. Another comment, hello, Randall and guest Emily. What words are popular? Noun, verb, phrases during Halloween. That's something we'll probably have to think of, and maybe in the after show notes, Emily, coming up with some words. Actually, this past week, I did through Zoom, I did Halloween bingo. So perhaps I can share that after the broadcast. That would be really interesting. And then another greeting from Afghanistan and another comment. Bahram says, I like Christmas. We have the same one called Salnal or New Year, but we don't give gifts on that day. So it's great to hear different ideas related to that. Well, let's go back, Emily, to talk a little bit about the holiday. What do you remember some of the things that we did also in addition to, unwrapping presents and so forth? What were some of the things that you received? And I see something there. It's kind of like a candy cane house, gingerbread house. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so gingerbread houses are pretty popular around here. It's gingerbread, or a lot of people will use like graham crackers, and lots of candy and frosting, and you make a house out of it. A lot of times it'll sit on the mantle for a week or two while you slowly pick away the candy while your mom's not looking. And then they usually go in the garbage. I mean, after a week or two of sitting out, the frosting's all crusty, and it's not like they taste very good at that point.
No. Yeah, I think that's kind of a fun activity. I see some pictures here of Aubrey getting her stocking. And usually tell us a little bit about the stockings, when we put them out and how they're filled and what you found in them. And then we'll talk about some other ideas as well.
Yeah, so the stockings we would put out Christmas Eve right before bed. And Santa would come and fill them with fruits, usually a banana and an orange. And then there would be toothpaste and floss and a toothbrush and other deodorant, and he was kind of very concerned about personal hygiene, stuff like that.
I think that's Mom coming with this personal hygiene item.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, you get a candy cane and some deodorant or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So let's talk about some other things as well. These are some pictures, again, of our family, the Christmas tree and so forth that we have. And let's talk about pinatas, what you remember. We'll talk, you're in that middle picture. The picture with me is Aubrey. But what do you remember growing up and doing the pinatas? Because pinatas are not a normal activity for most North Americans.
Yeah, so they're typically filled with candy. And we would usually do it at my grandparents' house on Christmas Eve, and everybody would be blindfolded or, shut your eyes and swing around a wooden stick trying to break it open. And then there'd be the mad dash.
That's the mad dash.
Yeah, as much candy as you can before other people take it.
Yeah, and the one thing is, I think, just kind of to give a little bit of context, my family is originally from Mexico, going back a generation or two. And this is a holiday tradition that many Mexican families do with the piñata. The picture with me in that is of Aubrey, our oldest daughter. That was over 30 years ago. And it's just kind of grown as the family has grown to what we have now is, like you said, a mash dash of grabbing candy and so forth. Most of the kids are grown now. And did we do that last year? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Or maybe with the great-grandchildren?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a fun tradition that we've done over the years. And let's see if we have some comments coming in. Here is a question. Teacher Randall, is it possible to watch you Zoom class on Halloween, which you mentioned earlier? I think this was an activity, just to briefly mention it, and maybe I could, post something in Facebook of where you can actually do bingo, Halloween bingo, Christmas bingo, numbers bingo, right through Zoom with your classroom. And I'll mention that another time. Please remind me of that, because I think that's a nice thing. Shamin says, nice to know about these celebrations. Similarly, in all cultures, it seems to be special types of food, other activities. Why celebrating, the important thing is that people like to have fun with family and friends and wish each other happiness and safety. That's great. Great question. And Ibrahim says, Emily, he says, how many days do you celebrate Halloween?
Just one on October 31st.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things I probably should mention is that people are decorating their houses outside their houses for weeks before. I think that's pretty popular that people will decorate and let people know and see that all kinds of. And I think on my Facebook I posted a couple of pictures as well. Dottie says piñatas are really amazing for kids in Colombia. I remember when I went to my cousins or friends' birthdays, and again, it's just not Christmas. Excited about how much toys or candies I could catch, and that's really important. Number one, it's not just about the the end of the year celebrations, but birthdays as well, and the idea that it is dealing with well, candies and toys as well. So a lot of different things. Well, let's now go on. And Emily, let's talk a little bit about Christmas Eve. What do you remember about Christmas Eve?
Do you mean New Year's Eve?
Oh, New Year's Eve. Exactly. New Year's Eve. Well, Christmas Eve is the time when we did that piñata and the family got together. All right. But let's talk about New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve was always really fun because we'd get to stay up till midnight. It's the only time of the year that my parents would let us do it. And oftentimes we would eat chimichangas and we would watch a movie called Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which is a pretty old movie now. And my parents would never stay awake all the way till midnight. They would always be out cold by the time the movie was done.
Yeah, we could never stay up. I mean, even now, I can't remember the last time I stayed up to midnight. And you mentioned chimichangas, which is a food. Can you describe for some of the people that probably don't know what a chimichanga is? Kind of
deliciously goodness, but it's basically like a deep fried burrito. Okay. My mom would use, I think it was probably sour cream and chicken and tomatoes and stuff like that. She'd wrap it all together with some seasoning and fry it.
And it was pretty good. And I know Mom still makes those as well. Great. And what do you think other people, let's go back to, again, our family, we were really simple. What are some things that people might do outside of our family for New Year's Eve?
Oh, I mean, New Year's, for us, it has always been really simple, but there are a lot of people that throw huge blowout parties, massive celebrations. New York always has a huge party. Some families do it differently. A lot of people will invite friends over and relatives and stuff, but we always just did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and chimichangas.
Right. Well, let's go on. Let's now talk about New Year's Day. And this is something that started actually, as you know, Emily, before you were born. And years ago, one of probably the most popular days in Japan is what's called Hatsumode. And that is the first day of the year where people go to shrines and prepare wonderful foods, New Year's foods and so forth. And years ago, this picture was probably, Aubrey was probably about 3 or so. So we're talking, 20 plus years, 26, 7, 8 years ago. We were in Tokyo. We were walking down the street. Most of the people were not out. And we came across this photo booth. And we thought, well, let's go ahead and take a picture of our family in the photo booth. And so this is inside a photo booth. There were just 4 of us. And then over the years, it grew and it grew. All right. And as our family grew, we kept fitting into the photo booth. What do you remember about doing that activity together?
I remember it being a lot of fun. And I remember it being really stuffy in there and sometimes difficult to get out.
And what was the last time we haven't done this for a few years, just because
10 years ago?
Yeah, it's been a while, just because the family has grown and grown and grown, and it's just harder and harder to get in there. But I think that was a fun activity, at least for our family. It's just on the new year, getting out, and this was mainly in Japan. These pictures were from Japan, most of them. It's just getting out, being together, like was mentioned in some of the comments, is that, family is really what holidays are about. And I think that was a fun activity that we did. Mona is saying we have two main religious celebrations in Islam. First is Eid, immediately after the month of Ramadan, and 2 months, 10 days later is the second Eid. Both Eids enhance the concept of charity, donation, and solidarity. And I think that's important to bring into this conversation, Emily, as we've been talking. We've been talking about some of the things that we've done, but this is an example where there are many celebrations, some connected to religious observance, some not. But thank you, Mona, for sharing that, because I think people need to be aware that even people in the United States who are Muslim or whatever carry with them their celebrations to the new country.
Yeah.
Samaya says, in the prep school syllabus, our pupils, and I believe Samaya is from Tunisia, our pupils are introduced to Easter holidays. We're going to be talking about that in a minute. It is nice to learn not only language, but also it's important to learn about the culture and tradition. So that balance of language and culture kind of go together. Thank you for sharing those comments, everyone. Let's now briefly talk a little bit about Easter. I don't have any pictures of Easter, but perhaps we can share that of what we did in the past.
Okay. Easter was always really fun. We would go to church in the morning, but by the time we got home, the Easter baskets, which are baskets filled with candy or colored eggs, and other little things like that, would be hidden.
No deodorant. No deodorant, right?
No deodorant this time.
No toothbrush.
No. Would be hidden throughout the house. My dad would always make them very difficult to find. And he still makes them difficult to find. And then we would go over to my grandparents' house. And when I was younger, my brother Josh would work really hard to make a massive Easter egg hunt. He'd put money in them or candy. And it was always really fun no matter what age you were.
Yeah. And I think to point out, as Mona mentioned, is that there are many religious observances around the year. And this, not just Easter, which is during spring, but there are a number of holidays around Easter to remember the life and death of Jesus Christ, his resurrection. So it is very important for so many people. And so thanks for sharing what we also do in our family with that. So that we've talked about those different celebrations. What I want to now move on to is just some special times. And let's start with birthdays. What do you remember about birthdays growing up?
Birthdays were usually pretty fun.
I'm going to save that picture. There was a picture there. I have to save that. But talk about birthdays, what we did, how we celebrated, cakes, and so forth.
Yeah, so around the week of your birthday, my parents would take us out to eat to pretty much any restaurant we wanted to go to. And then on our birthday, we would, just pretty much have a normal day most of the day until dinner. And my mom would make us a special meal, and she would make us a cake, and we'd have ice cream. And that dinosaur cake was one of Michael's when he was little. I remember that cake very well. He was so excited about that cake.
And talk about probably the most famous cakes that Mom made.
So on our 12th birthdays, those were 12 years old was important religiously. My mom would make a 12-layer cake. It'd be an ice cream, like brownie 12-layer cake. And that she would always she spent so long on those cakes and had to skewer them together so they didn't topple over. And it was amazing though.
Yeah, it was like, I think, a brownie layer, then an ice cream layer, a brownie layer, an ice cream layer, brownie layer. And I know it seemed like surely her mom heard back from other families, because when kids found out that mom was making this giant cake, I mean, it took a lot of work, because when you made a brownie layer and then you put an ice cream layer, you'd have to freeze it. And then you take it out and you'd make another brownie layer and then another ice cream layer and then freeze it. And I know a lot of people really, I think, were jealous.
Yes.
And I don't think, I mean, it was a lot of cake. And the other thing is, just over the years, a picture that is Josh. I think it was his second birthday, and he's screaming. This is when we were in Japan, because we lit the candles because we thought, well, you like candles. And he started screaming because his cake was being you know, you know, touched by fire, and he was really uh, screaming away. And there's Aubrey again with one of the birthday parties. And I know when we were in Japan, especially when the kids were growing up, we had kids coming over. And let me ask you, how was our observance of birthdays maybe a little bit different than other people's? And I would be interested, Emily and I would be interested in hearing, if you celebrate birthdays in your country, kind of what do you do in those cases? So, Emily, what do other families do that you know of?
A lot of families have similar traditions, but a lot of families go a little more all out on kids' birthday parties. I was really, really shy when I was little, so I didn't have a lot of friend birthday parties. I just didn't want the attention or anything like that. Um, but a lot of families would invite all the neighbor kids and, the kids' classmates and everything went over to celebrate birthdays.
Okay.
Um,
So, what about you now? Now that you're a mother, Odin is 3 years old. Describe birthday parties for him.
so my in-laws family is very, very involved. And they often, my husband's aunts and uncles, they all want to come out and celebrate Odin's birthday, and they make it a huge party just for him. My sister-in-law is a baker, and so she makes him these nice elaborate cakes. And so, I mean, he's very, very spoiled on his little birthday.
Oh, he loves it, and we love it too.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun time for everyone. So, Emily, so far we've talked about Halloween. We talked a little bit about Thanksgiving. We talked a little bit about Christmas. Again, those that are watching, feel free to share any comments or questions about what we're discussing or your own holidays. We've appreciated those so far. We talked about Easter. We've talked about birthdays a little bit. We're not covering everything today, but let's also talk about other things that we did as a family that might be similar or different from other people. So, first of all, growing up, a lot of people, for example, for family vacations, at least in our area, might go where?
Goblin Valley or Arches.
Yeah, okay, they might go to the outdoors. A lot of people do. That's what we did. Some people went to like Disneyland. And how many times do you remember going to Disneyland when you were growing up?
Never.
I know.
And mom says it's because you never wanted to go.
Well, I didn't at the time. I really wasn't interested. I think I've been to Disneyland once here in the United States, but I think there were different reasons. And I think in part, a lot of things that we did were in Utah and so forth. So can you just tell us a little bit about what we did as a family growing up that might be similar or different than others?
Yeah. My dad would always make it really special for us. And each kid would get one trip with just dad and them. And then there would be another trip of like Michael and me would go, and Josh and Aubrey would go, and we would go hiking. Dad came up with all these creative stories called Don Goody Goody Coon and Maria, which means acorn boy. And he would regale us with all these wild tales while we would be hiking and exploring. And he was always really laid back and never seemed like he was worried about us. But now as a parent, I can only imagine, like watching your child jumping from rocks and things like that. And in the morning, we would always have donuts. That was our breakfast, was donuts. And that was always really fun too.
Yeah, and I think some of the things, if people ever come to Utah, the picture of you and Mike go off to the right, that's called Little Wild Horse Canyon. It's a really narrow slot canyon. So we really like the outdoor. I think I really liked it, and I really wanted to share with my kids. I thought that was interesting. Certainly going to Disneyland can be fun. I just wanted to share with my kids and a little bit different.
Yeah.
And then growing up, what were some of the things that we've done as well over the years?
Well, going back to the previous pictures,
Okay.
you and me have taken Odin to every single one of those places.
Oh, yeah, we have. Yeah.
So
So it's kind of like, to be honest, Emily, it's been a real privilege and honor to, relive these experiences with you and Odin. So over the last
yeah,
couple of years, we've been doing a trip, you, me, and Odin, to the same places. And that has
yeah,
been
yeah.
wonderful for me. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about just over the years, other activities we've done.
Yeah. I really enjoy fishing. It's something that I've done with my dad since I was little. That is the biggest fish I've ever caught. It was a 8.5 pound catfish.
Big.
And the fishing pole was not supposed to be able to pull that big of a fish in, and it nearly broke. And then my dad and I will go biking with Odin. He rides in a little carrier behind the bike, and we go biking together and stuff like that.
Great. Yeah, those have always been fun. And I'm always interested in hearing what people are doing too. As has been mentioned several times about human connection and connecting with family in different ways. Wasila says, in some parts of Tunisia, the family drop a jar full of candies on the floor, and kids would race to catch as many candies as they can, which is more or less like a piñata. Thank you. I think it's great to hear that some of these could be universal type of activities, but maybe celebrated just slightly a little bit differently. Some Tunisians also celebrate the New Year's Eve. Others see it just as the first day of a new year. So thank you, Wasila, for sharing that, because I'm always interested in finding out that maybe some of these traditions are not so unique. They're, you could say, universal in a certain way. So let's kind of wrap this up, Emily, talking a little bit about one other activity that we've done several times, and these are our sushi parties. So we've talked about holidays, we talked about birthdays, we talked a little bit about trips. Let's talk about sushi parties and how we all got into loving sushi.
Yeah, well, I have to say sushi parties are my favorite parties. When we lived in Japan, my mom and my dad really came to love sushi. And now as things have changed a little bit in where we live, it's easier to get access to sushi fish. And so now about once a year, we'll have this huge party where everyone will come over and make sushi. And it's a lot of fun. It's a ton of fun.
And I think that's been great as well. And, I think as a father, as a family, what you want to try to do is share holiday traditions, celebrations, activities that maybe you could impart or share with your other family, with your children and grandchildren, that they might find as of great value as well. All right. Well, Emily, as we wrap up, I want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and comments, and I want to wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for joining this broadcast, personalizing it, sharing with my daughter a little bit about holiday traditions. Feel free to join in the conversation on Facebook if you have other comments about holiday traditions that you observe in your own country. Feel free to share as well. Just as a final reminder, I want to mention next week's broadcast. That will be a really interesting one called Teaching in Transition with Pragya Adhikari, talking a little bit about her experiences in Nepal and beyond. I think that will be a wonderful episode to continue our profiles of teachers from around the world. Once again, I want to thank you for being a part of this broadcast. Your voices are always appreciated. That's what enriches this conversation with people from around the world. Have a wonderful day and an even better tomorrow.